Unpatriotic anti-Americans are being celebrated and even elected to national office. And along those same lines, should Muslims be disqualified from serving in national public office? The Supreme Court blocks the president from putting the citizenship question on the census. And do gun buybacks actually work? And AOC displays her profound ignorance yet again. We'll get into all that and more. I'm Big E, and this is the Liberty Cast. Now, before I get into what I really wanted to talk about, I just wanted to touch on the ungrateful, unpatriotic, anti-American soccer player, Megan Rapinoe.
Ding, ding.
I wrote a short piece about it up on thelibertycast.net, but something that I only really touched on in the piece but didn't expand on was the selfishness that's so apparent in her behavior, and to a certain extent, by extension, the behavior of the entire team, or at least many of the players on the team. But just look at the picture that accompanied that piece I wrote. The pose she's striking in that picture says, "Look at me. Look what I did." Now, don't get me wrong. I appreciate and admire individual achievement. She apparently scored a bunch of goals, and in the heat of the moment of such an achievement, I see nothing wrong with celebrating. I would see something wrong with not celebrating, actually. But that pose, which has apparently become a thing, is very egotistical in nature. I'm going to be very interested to see how long this team can stay together in light of Rapinoe's affinity for the spotlight. And another gem of hers that came at the end of her interview with Anderson Cooper, which I touched on a few bits in that piece I wrote. But listen to this.
Just a final question. I'm not going to ask you how long you're going to play soccer for, because I don't want to be ageist, and I think you're such a badass you could play for as long as you want, as far as I can tell. But I was reading, and I know nothing about sports, by the way, but I read a lot about it to try to understand. I didn't, say that you made a home run or anything.
I basically did, though. I basically hit it out of the park. Pretty much. She hit a home run. She hit a grand slam.
Yeah. Okay. You can just drop the mic right now and just walk off if you want.
Wow. I pretty much hit a grand slam, or whatever she said. But she is the prototypical leftist. And again, everything is about herself. They're the ones that are so virtuous that taking your money and giving it to others who didn't earn it is a good thing. Morality is a social construct, and you can do whatever you want as long as you feel good. Speak your truth. And if anyone else doesn't agree, well, then they're a racist or a homophobe, or as Dan Bongino likes to say, istophobic phobophobe. It's all about self. It stopped being about what was on the front of their jerseys, USA. It became about the individual. She's really a contemptible human being. I will really be glad when her 15 minutes are up. But I have a feeling that in this era of wokeness, the media is going to keep shoving her in our faces. And I'm really not looking forward to it. But okay, moving on. So last week, Tucker Carlson, on his show, he let Ilhan Omar have it with both barrels.
In a recent piece in the Washington Post, the reporter put it this way, quote, "In Omar's version, America isn't the big-hearted country that saved her from a brutal war and a bleak refugee camp. It wasn't a meritocracy that helped her attend college or vaulted her into Congress. Instead, it was the country that had failed to live up to its founding ideals, a place that had disappointed her and so many immigrants, refugees, and minorities like her," end quote. If anything, that's an understatement. Omar isn't disappointed in America. She's enraged by it. Virtually every public statement she makes accuses Americans of bigotry and racism. This is an immoral country, she says. She has undisguised contempt for the United States and for its people. Ilhan Omar is living proof that the way we practice immigration has become dangerous to this country. A system designed to strengthen America is instead undermining it. Some of the very people we try hardest to help have come to hate us passionately.
Now, that's just a 1-minute clip. On Tuesday, at the end of his show, it's worth watching. He went on for about 6 or 7 minutes, and then the next day after she responded, he had about an 11-minute monologue about her. They're worth checking out. But here's the thing. She never tried to refute anything he said. She let loose a series of tweets accusing Tucker Carlson of being a white supremacist and a racist and all this other nonsense. But she didn't refute anything. She didn't say, you are factually wrong about this, this, and this. Nothing. But if you listen to this show regularly, you know that I have also been very critical of Ilhan Omar. She is another anti-American, even more dangerous than Rapinoe, because right now, Rapinoe's just annoying, and she's making noise about running for office and this, that, and the other, whatever. But Omar, who has also likely broken the law by committing immigration fraud, has the potential to wield real power at some point in the future if we don't wake up and get her out of office. Now, as a black man, my criticism of her clearly has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the fact that as an elected official in the greatest country in the history of the world, she has done nothing but trash this country, criticize it, and spread lies about it. Lies about the United States and lies about our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel. She has said the most ridiculous things about Jews. She's an anti-Semite, and the evidence for that is overwhelming. But how did she come to hate the country that welcomed her and her family all those years ago? Well, it's obvious, and no one ever seems to bring it up that I've ever heard. Well, a few people have, but it never gets any play. Perhaps, I guess, because it's not in good taste to say in polite conversation. I've been accused once or twice of being impolite, but I don't care. I'm going to say it anyway. She's a Muslim. She is a proponent of Sharia law, and that is antithetical to the Constitution. The Quran requires her to kill the infidel. That means you. That means me. That means anyone who is not a Muslim. But not just anyone who's not a Muslim. Anyone who doesn't convert to Islam or pay the jizya tax, which is a tax that non-Muslims who don't want to convert pay in order to have these Muslims not kill them. And please do not buy into the notion that with over 1 billion Muslims, the extremists do not represent the mainstream moderate Muslims. Let me tell you something. Anyone who has read the Quran or is familiar with the Hadith knows that there is no such thing as a moderate Muslim. What some euphemistically call extremists are nothing more than Muslims following the mandates that are set forth in the Quran. If any so-called moderate Muslims are faced with death at the hands of the quote-unquote extremists, or join them in fighting the infidels, which way do you think they're going to go? And there's really only one right answer to that question. So why is the left so eager to embrace a culture that has no desire to embrace the Western civilization in return? In fact, their stated desire, stated explicitly, is to destroy it. Why are they so quick to dismiss it when we hear chants of death to America from the Iranian parliament? The government who sponsors terrorism chanting death to America, and they just shrug? They don't mean it. Okay, whatever. And then why do people vote into national office candidates who subscribe to such beliefs like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib? Well, I have a theory. It's because the hatred for this country displayed by Americans like Rapinoe is not just ominously widespread, but taught to the younger generations by leftist educators. And now we're seeing those people who have been indoctrinated with this leftist ideology come of age. Omar and Tlaib are Muslims already predisposed to hating the United States and being educated by leftists, or more precisely, further indoctrinated by leftists who have hatred for the United States, is a double whammy. Now, what I'm about to say is something that I've said on social media and taken some heat for. But Omar, Tlaib, and any other Muslim should never be allowed to hold national public office. Yes, I know Article 6, Section 3 of the Constitution says that no religious test shall ever be required as qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. I get it. But when the Constitution was written, I don't think that the founders anticipated that the citizenry would devolve into such a self-loathing, self-destructive group of people. But here's why I think that they are disqualified from serving. They swore to uphold the Constitution, yet took their oaths of office on the Quran, which is antithetical to the Constitution. They also believe in Sharia law, which is also diametrically opposed to the principles set forth in the Constitution. So if you don't believe in the founding document of the country, you should not be allowed to serve in office where you're sworn to protect and uphold the principles therein. I'm sure some people are probably going to call me a hypocrite because that's a similar argument to getting rid of the Second Amendment. People try to perpetuate the myth that the founders couldn't have anticipated the advancements in weapons technology. But the evidence is there to suggest that they did, and I've gone over that several times. So I don't think my argument is hypocritical at all. The Second Amendment is there to help preserve the Constitution and, by extension, the country. Allowing people who hate this country and don't believe in its founding principles and want to fundamentally transform the country is dangerous. And at this point, to think that a Muslim can follow the Quran and then even want to defend the Constitution is a dangerously naive way of thinking. Change my mind. There's another story I wanted to talk to you guys about, but let me ask you this question. Why is it controversial to ask if you're a citizen on the United States Census? Why is the left fighting so hard to keep the question off the census? And why did the Supreme Court rule that the question can't be added? We'll attempt to answer those questions on the other side of this quick break. And another question is, why did the president give up on adding it to the census? Well, the fact is, these are all pretty easy questions, but let's start with the easiest one first. The short answer to why the Supreme Court ruled the way it did is that Chief Justice John Roberts is now nothing more than a left-wing activist. Justice Roberts wrote the opinion and said that, unlike a typical case in which an agency may have both stated and unstated reasons for a decision, here the VRA, the Voting Rights Act, enforcement rationale, the sole stated reason, seems to have been contrived. And saying that the rationale is contrived seems to presume knowledge of another person's thoughts. That doesn't sound like very sound legal reasoning to me. Now, I'm no legal scholar, but I'm having a hard time understanding how this is not a valid reason for including the question on the census. And then again, why is Supreme Court approval necessary to add it back when it was never required to take it off? My understanding is that it's up to the Commerce Secretary's discretion to add the citizenship question to the census. Justice Thomas wrote the dissenting opinion, and he agreed. And I quote, "For the first time ever, the court invalidates an agency action solely because it questions the sincerity of the agency's otherwise adequate rationale." He goes on, "The court does not hold that the secretary merely had additional, unstated reasons for reinstating the citizenship question. Rather, it holds that the secretary's stated rationale did not factor at all into his decision. The court's holding reflects an unprecedented departure from our deferential review of discretionary agency decisions, and if taken seriously as a rule of decision, this holding would transform administrative law. I mean, the ramifications of this are obvious. It's going to open up every decision by every cabinet secretary and agency head to court challenges and judicial review. And here's one of my favorite lines in Justice Thomas's dissent, and I quote, "With today's decision, the court has opened up a Pandora's box of pretext-based challenges in administrative law." Pandora's box. We all remember how well that turned out. But the next question I ask is, why is it controversial to ask if you're a citizen of this country? Of course, the answer is it's not. Every country in the world asks this question, and it's not unreasonable. Especially when you consider that the results of the census are instrumental in determining the number of congressional seats in each state, as well as how federal funds get distributed. It seems to me, and maybe I'm missing something, but it seems to me that everyone would benefit from an accurate census. But this actually ties into the last question, which is, why are they fighting so hard to keep it off? Well, they don't want a consolidated record of who's a citizen and who is not, because that means that their districts will probably get less seats and their districts will get less federal funds allocated. So to put it more bluntly, they're fighting it so hard because it means less money and less power. And as we've said on this show many, many times, the only thing the leftists in government care about is money and power. If they can get illegals to respond to the census, that means more money for their districts and more seats in the House. And for those listening who may not be aware, I imagine most are, but for those who may not be aware, the number of representatives in each state is determined by population. So it follows that the more people they can get to respond, the more representatives and therefore more electors, in case the interstate compact deal falls through. Right now, there's one representative for somewhere around every 700 to 750,000 people, depending on which source you look at. So with the number of illegals in this country, even if you take the ridiculously low number of 11 million, the left likes to trot that number out for some reason, that's about 15 to 20 new representatives. And we all know that the actual number has to be somewhere around 30 million. It's been 11 million now for over a decade. And with all the new illegals pouring in and not leaving, to continue to use that number is just absurd. So if you take the actual number of 30 million, now you're talking somewhere around 50 new representatives, most of whom most likely would all be Democrat. So imagine what that does to the Electoral College. It makes the chances of a Republican winning the presidency again highly unlikely, if impossible, which is exactly what the left wants. And they're willing to bend, break, change any rule, move any goalpost to make that happen. Now, adding that many representatives is probably unlikely. They won't get every illegal alien to respond, but it won't really take that many, just a few key states, to swing the Electoral College almost permanently to the Democrats. But the last question I wanted to address is, why did the president give up on adding it to the census? And is this a defeat? I don't really think he gave up. I think it's more that they just ran out of time. I mean, the census is already being printed. An executive order to add that question to the census would have certainly been challenged again, further delaying proceedings and possibly delaying the census altogether. Some conservatives I heard are actually trying to spin this as more Trump winning, or maybe not spin, maybe they actually believe that this was a win for President Trump. I don't see it that way. He has ordered all the government agencies with citizenship information to give it to the Commerce Department, and that's fine, but it's the census that is to be used for apportionment purposes. and that's the allocating of congressional seats and money and the like. If they use the information gathered from these agencies for apportionment purposes, they will most definitely face another court challenge and probably lose, and therefore get blocked from using the information for those purposes. And so I don't see how that's a win. If I'm missing something, please let me know. But I don't think so. I can be persuaded to believe that this is a Trump win if there are some facts and data to back that up. Bring it. All right, let's switch gears here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, this story isn't really about the Second Amendment, but it is Second Amendment adjacent. The left often cites, almost always cites, Australia and their gun confiscation program as something to emulate. Australia doesn't even believe that. There are more guns now in Australia than before the confiscation. But after the tragic massacre in Christchurch, New Zealand, they implemented a confiscation program of their own. They estimate that there are somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million guns in New Zealand, and of those guns, there's about 13,500 that are military-style semi-automatics, according to a report by Reuters. Of course, that count could be way off because New Zealand doesn't have a registry. So they have no idea who has the guns and who has how many. So they banned what right now is an estimated 13,500 guns. How many do you think actually were turned in? Go ahead, guess. $1,000. And there's no Second Amendment over there. No constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms over there. So given that, how many guns do you think would get voluntarily handed over if they get something like that passed here? I suspect it will probably be more than that in raw numbers, because I think there are some gun owners that don't believe in the Second Amendment. I mean, remember those idiots that filmed themselves destroying their ARs? But as a percentage, I imagine it'll be much lower. But let's make sure that it never comes to that and we never have to find out. In stupid leftist gun stories news, listen to this nonsense. An 8th grade student in Maryland was suspended for 3 weeks and didn't get to graduate with his class this past June. Did he bring a gun to school? Nope. Did he threaten to shoot someone at school? Was he arrested for a gun crime? Nope. He was suspended for 3 weeks for being an idiot on social media. He was in the background of a friend's Snapchat video in which this kid held a disabled airsoft gun. I'm not sure how they knew it was disabled. I haven't read those details yet. But he also posed for a picture with this same friend who held him in a headlock with the fake gun pointing at his head. The picture was shared with a few friends, I guess, on Snapchat and some group or something like that. I don't have Snapchat. I don't know how it works. And the kid admitted that they were just trying to look like a badass. Okay. He's 8th grade. What does that make him? 14? Stupid, absolutely. And let me just say, aren't you glad you didn't grow up at a time when all of your dumb decisions could be preserved forever online? Let me tell you something. Yeah. I am very glad that the antics of my friends and me are not preserved on any sort of media that can be called up. Because, yeah. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get you out of here on something that is either going to make you laugh or cry. All right, y'all. So I thought about what to call this segment, and at first I settled on This Week in Stupidity. Okay, but could be better. But for now, let's just call it Moron of the Week. But we'll work on that, and I'll take suggestions if you have any after hearing this. Please feel free to let me know. But there's a book that came out recently where President Trump compared Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to Eva Peron. That's not a compliment. I suspect she only knows who Eva Peron is from the 96 movie starring Madonna. I never saw the movie, but I suspected it was highly romanticized and historically inaccurate. But in response, she tweeted, and I quote, "I know that like every woman of the people, I have more strength than I appear to have. Evita Peron." She followed that up with another quote. "I had watched for many years and seen how a few rich families held much of Argentina's wealth and power in their hands. So the government brought in an 8-hour working day, sickness pay, and fair wages to give the poor workers a fair go. Evita Peron." Does she not know who this woman really is? Well, she can't. She can't. If she did know, I'm so baffled right now, even coming from her, because we all know she's an idiot. But get it together, Biggie. Okay. Eva Peron was a Nazi sympathizer. And the irony, considering how AOC has been blathering on about concentration camps, is amazing. But there's more irony where that came from, because this week she complained that she was on too many committees and that she thought that in addition to Nancy Pelosi being a racist, that she thought that being on all these committees was just giving her busy work. Then again, I guess socialists never really want to work. They want everyone else to do their work for them. But here's the thing. You are a freshman congresswoman who needs to learn how the process works, who needs to learn how to legislate. And frankly, unless something happens in your district, we should never hear your name in your first term. You should be learning the ropes. Oh, wait, I must have forgot.
I'm the boss.
But here's hoping that she loses next year and that she fades into the obscurity of someone with her credentials deserves. But there you have it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the inaugural LibertyCast Moron of the Week. And I suspect that she will win this award many more times and is the odds-on favorite to win the LibertyCast Moron of the Year award, which I just now came up with, so stay tuned for that. All right, y'all, there's so much more that we could talk about, but unfortunately, we're out of time, so that's going to have to wait until next week. But thank you all for listening, and you can find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Please check us out, subscribe, leave a review. You can also find all of our shows since the beginning on the website, thelibertycast.net, and you can find all of our content there in one spot, blog posts, articles, and the podcast. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's at The Liberty Cast on all 3 platforms. So you'll find additional content there, funny memes, posts that may not warrant an entire blog post, but I'll post it on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, or all 3, depending on what it is. But as I said, thank you all for listening. And as usual, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.